Good morning, Providence. I am excited to be starting the new year with you guys, heading into 2023. We've just spent the last 3 weeks talking about the Advent, the next coming of Jesus Christ when he returns to the earth as King, and we've talked about 3 primary virtues within Christianity: faith, hope, and love, and how those 3 virtues tie in to our abiding and living hope as we seek to follow him as we await his return. And today I want to talk about, just briefly, a reality that has set in ever since Jesus came as a baby. We sing about it. It's in so many different Christmas songs. The idea of God now being with us. He's no longer far off. He's not some distant deity. He is in the flesh with us, with the birth of Jesus. And when Jesus ascended into heaven after his death, burial, and resurrection, that reality didn't go away. That reality remains. God is still with us. And so I just want to look at 3 really simple things. First, I want to give you a glimpse of what that looks like, and we'll go back to the Old Testament for that. And then I want to look at a current reality, how deeply that reality sets in for us now. And then we'll close by looking at an enduring promise. So first of all, the glimpse. We're going to run back to 2 Chronicles chapter 13. And the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles are really one book, and they're telling one story. They're kind of telling the history of the kings of Israel of that period of time right after the Judges, where you have this promising king ascending to the throne, David, and then the king after him, Solomon, immediately starts this decline. And then for successive generations, king after king after king, we see failure and a running from God, abandoning this God who was promising to be with them. They were running from him. And so in the midst of all of this running from God and all of this sin and chaos, there would occasionally come a king who was a man after God's own heart, who the Bible will say followed in the ways of David, his father. And they're rare little pinpoints of light in a very dark setting, but they do show up occasionally. And in 2 Chronicles chapter 13, we have one of these kings. He's an imperfect picture of David, and certainly even David himself was an imperfect king, but he was better than many. And this is speaking of the king Abijah. King Abijah began to reign over Judah. This is the southern kingdom of Israel. Israel has now split into 2 different kingdoms. You've got Israel in the north, and now you've got Judah in the south. And Abijah is reigning over Judah. And the king of Israel at the time, Jeroboam, is coming against this king Abijah with all of his armies because he wants to force the kingdom of Judah back into the control of the nation of Israel. He wants to forcibly reunite these 2 kingdoms into one kingdom. And so he's coming with his armies against Abijah, and he outnumbers Abijah's armies 2-1. So you have this king, Abijah, who is fearing God, seeking to be obedient to God, at least a better example of obedience than we've seen in previous generations. And he's got his armies, and now his armies are outnumbered 2-1. And yet he makes this bold declaration to Jeroboam. He challenges him as Jeroboam has set his armies around the kingdom or around the city. They're getting ready to lay siege to this city. And Abijah steps out and delivers this challenge. But as for us, Jeroboam, the Lord is our God, and we have not forsaken him. Like you have, is what he left unsaid. Jeroboam had been worshiping false gods. He had led all of Israel into worshiping false gods. And Abijah said, the Lord is our God. We have not forsaken him. We have priests. We have people who love God. And therefore, he says in verse 12, behold, God is with us at our head. God is with us at our head. Do not fight against the Lord, Jeroboam, the God of your fathers, for you cannot succeed. So Abijah, this good king, is pleading with Jeroboam, don't do this. Even though it looks like you're going to outnumber us and you're going to win and you will defeat us, you cannot defeat God. Sure, the odds are 2-1 against us, but with God on our side, we're not going to lose. You cannot prevail. Just turn around and go home. Jeroboam doesn't do that. Instead, he fights. The scripture says that God gave them into Abijah's hand and defeated the Israelites and sent them running. And so then Abijah goes and overtakes some cities, and very quickly he leaves the scene, and we're introduced to successive kings. But in the midst of this story, you have this king very boldly saying, against overwhelming odds, saying, don't do this, don't attack us. Behold, God is with us at our head. That's a little glimpse of a promise that God had made to his people over and over and over again throughout the story. From the beginning with Adam and Eve, he said, I will be with you. And all the way through Noah and Moses, and even before Moses, Abraham, Joseph, all of them, David, God was promising, if you will honor me and you will follow my ways, if you'll obey my commands, I will be with you, and no one can stand against you. And just as surely as we know God is going to keep that promise throughout Old Testament history, we also know mankind will time and time again fail to live up to our part of that covenant, to love the Lord with all our heart, soul, and mind. Very quickly in successive chapters, it goes dark for the kingdom of Judah, and successive kings will not follow after the ways of David. They will abandon God. And just occasionally, you get these little hints that maybe this is a good king. Maybe this next one will be a good king. And sometimes they're decent, sometimes they're awful, but they're never this promised Messiah. In fact, the book of Chronicles really wants to focus on two tribes of Israel. First, it wants to focus on the tribe of Judah, because this is the tribe from which Messiah will come. He's been prophesied to come. And then the writer of Chronicles is also focusing on the tribe of Levi, because he's pointing to the promise of the restoration of the temple and the worship of God's people when their hearts are reunited to him and his people return to him. And so he focuses on these two tribes, but he leaves the end of the book hanging. It actually concludes with an incomplete sentence because the Messiah never comes. In fact, all you get is this bleak picture. By the time you get to the end of Chronicles, you're left wanting a good king, the promised Messiah, and we don't see him. The last thing we see, God's people are now in captivity. And this pagan king closes out the book by saying this, thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is among you of all his people, may the Lord his God be with him. Let him go up. And then it cuts off. That's it. And in the Hebrew, that is an incomplete sentence. The story is incomplete here. The last thing we hear is a pagan king, because God's people have forsaken him and have forgotten this reality. We have a pagan king saying, may your God be with you, reminding God's people of God's promise to be with them. And then we wait, and we wait, and we wait for hundreds of years for God to be with us once again. And then we know, because we've just finished singing and celebrating Christmas, we know that God comes in the form of a baby in Bethlehem. And in the New Testament reality, we see that God is with his people in the flesh. We have a better reality now than what Abijah had. Abijah, this good king, knew enough of God and had a relationship that was with God to know that God is with us. And if God is with us, nobody can stand against us, which is exactly what Paul writes in Romans chapter 8. And this is our present reality as we head into this new year. Paul writes in Romans 8:31, what then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? As we head into 2023, we've got all kinds of things looming out there that seem to be set against us. We've got wars in the world. We've got Russia invading Ukraine. We have the ever-present threat of the pandemic coming back. So we have all these new variants and strands of COVID that will occasionally make an appearance and dominate the media for a little while. We've got political strife. We have the threat of a recession and economic challenges in our immediate future. So as we look at 2023, if we're listening to the news, we have reason to be afraid. We have reason to think that we're overwhelmed by all of these negative things. But in reality, as we face 2023, as I face 2023, I am excited. Because I've spent time over this last several months beholding the reality that God is with us at our head. It's interesting that Abijah made that declaration. Over 1,000 times in Scripture, we see the word behold appear. The Bible is a book that is about beholding something. It's not just a quick glance at reality or a quick glance at truth. Many times, over and over and over again, Scripture will tell us to behold, to just pause and behold something. It's taking time to reflect on it and let the reality that we're looking at sink into our lives and then affect the outcome of our actions. That's what it means to behold. In fact, James says, he says this kind of ironically, if we were to listen to Scripture, read Scripture, and then go do whatever we wanted, we're like somebody who beholds himself in a mirror and then doesn't change anything. So as you're getting ready for work in the morning and you get out of bed and you look like a disaster and you behold that in the mirror, you know if that reality has sunk in, if you've really beheld reality, if you do something about it. And so Abijah calls his people to behold the reality that God is with us. And if we will behold this reality that Paul now is holding out to us, if God is for us, who can be against us? We can face whatever 2023 has in store. And in fact, we can go into 2023 knowing that God has good things in store for us. His kingdom is going to advance. We don't know what's going to happen politically. We don't know what's going to happen economically. We don't know what's going to happen globally. But we do know one thing. Jesus Christ in 2023 is going to build his church. He's going to continue building his church, and the gates of hell will not stand against it. And if God is for us, in reality, if God is for us, who can possibly be against us? So if we will let that reality sink in and affect the outcome of our actions and our beliefs and our emotions, we can charge into 2023 with a great deal of excitement as a church on the move. And I'm excited to do that. I'm excited to be a part of that. Already based on what we've seen God do in our midst this year. We just finished a really exciting year-end covenant partners meeting where we talked about all that God's done for us and all that we expect him to do for us in the future. And we're excited about this. So we have great cause for excitement and celebration because God is with us at our head. So that's the present reality. We've had the glimpse in the past of what that looked like. We've seen our current and better reality. And now I just want to leave you with an enduring promise in Matthew chapter 28. Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us, God in the flesh, left us with this promise before he ascended. This is after he's crucified and buried and risen from the grave. He's ascending to his rightful throne as the king over the entire universe. And he says this before his departure. He says, behold, just like Abijah, behold, I am with you. Behold, Providence, he's with us. Behold that. Consider that. Dwell on that. As we start another year, let that reality sink in. Behold, Jesus, Emmanuel, is with us at our head. Who can be against us? It's good news for you because it tells you your hope doesn't rest in your politicians. Your hope doesn't rest in your pastors. It's not just good news because your pastors are with you, though we are with you. But if that was your hope, you'd be quickly disappointed because we're not perfect leaders. That's not what I want you to behold right now. What I want you to behold and what Jesus himself wants you to behold is that God himself is with us in the flesh at our head. And he's going to lead us next year as we go into this year. And the reason this promise is enduring is because of what he said about it. Behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. That is a better promise than what Abijah had back in Chronicles. Because what Abijah had in terms of the presence of God was somewhat conditional. It was conditioned on the people of God living like the people of God. And when they failed to live like the people of God, you have this, in the prophecy of Ezekiel, you have this haunting scene of the presence of God slowly leaving his people. And it's devastating. And it's immediately after that his people are taken captive by foreign nations and led away. God's presence has left his people. But when Jesus came, his promise is so much better because it's not based on my performance, it's based on his performance. It's not, when I disobey now, I'm out and God's presence has left me. When I disobey, I have somebody who has obeyed in my place, who stands ready to forgive me the moment I confess my disobedience and turn back to him. He will never leave. Hebrews says the new promise in Jesus is that he will never leave us or forsake us, even to the end of the age. How long is that? It depends on who you ask. According to the BBC, the earth has about 1 billion years left, and that's it. According to the Scientific American, humanity has anywhere from 5,000 years left to maybe 7 million years left, depending on what we do with the climate and whether or not we learn some lessons in the years ahead. Anywhere from 5,000 years to 7 million years. None of those things matter. There's a lot of people trying to guess how long the earth has left, how long humanity has left, but it doesn't matter. As long as we have left, Jesus has promised he is going with us at our head. So Providence, as we head into 2023, let's behold this together. Let's remind each other of this reality. Let's sing about this and let's live it out. God is with us at our head.